Security, escort this gentleman out, please.
Come on, Soda Pop, let's go.
First agenda is open discussion. Councilor Erpenbach.
Thank you, and best wishes to Councilor Rolfing. We haven't seen him for a while either, so we need him to heal up. I just wanted to clarify a couple of things that I said last week. That I knew there were pieces of the council manual that I had in my hand, and then I kept reading. They were public documents, but they aren't all in the manual. So I just wanted to remind our team that our organizational chart is in the manual. And it starts with council and then has our three committees. The operations committee is one of them, and it oversees the legislative operations manager and the city clerk. And then the notes that I read from were really a part of that historical intent of why the operations committee was created in the first place in 2012. It was a response to some wild and crazy times here with staff, and it was one of those things that we really learned very quickly as a council that we needed to support our leadership in a more profound way, and that has been what the operations committee has been about. It has been about putting those human resources, especially those private conversations, those private decisions regarding staff, putting them into a more formal atmosphere. I know that leadership is working on that idea of how do we convey all that information, and I have never felt like the operations committee was keeping anything from me, and so I just wanted folks to understand that everything that I read from was public document. It's just not all in the manual, so I apologize for being misleading last week. So that's my input. Thank you.
First of all, thank you very much. That's very clarifying. We appreciate that. I do want to say that I think a lot of people have maybe noticed some more spirited, open discussion recently. And I think, not to speak for everybody who's new, but I know at least for some of us, transparency was something that was very big for us when we ran. It wasn't just a platitude. And so we wanted to make sure we really communicated with the public, and anything that we can talk about in the open, we wanted to do that. And something new that we've learned is that we just can't get together 5 or 6 people for a coffee. We have to put out a notice of public meeting. So it's very difficult sometimes to just have an open discussion with everybody as a group. And this is the one chance that we have to do it. And so we're kind of taking advantage of it. We don't want to monopolize and sit here for an hour, but we're just, trying to use it to our advantage. The only thing I guess I would say about the operations committee is and I'm sure others have a lot to learn, and I'm going to try to learn the history of it, why it exists, what we do with it. And there's been some concerns raised to me, and I sit on the committee, and I can understand them, and I'm just kind of thinking about it philosophically of, are there things that might get, not decided, but something that might kind of get put out there, and then the ball is sort of rolling, and how do we communicate that to the rest of the council, and what would be appropriate to talk about in such a group and what wouldn't be? Maybe everything that's personnel should be an executive session and everybody should talk about. And I don't know the pros and cons. I'm new here, but that's just kind of what's being brought up to me. And I think it's a very valid point, and we should just be open and talk about it as we go and figure it out.
Okay. Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Staley.
Yes, and thank you, Councilwoman Erpenbach, for that clarification, because some of us did go back to the manual and we did not find the information in here, and we have looked at the manual and we're trying to learn as we go. But there is a concern, and I know some of us were not aware of this when we were running, and even as citizens, that we have a committee that only allows 4 council members to attend. And we are all 8 equals here, so we feel that we should all be available to go to that meeting. We should all hear what's happening there. We should all be involved with decisions at the ground level. And so moving forward, I'm hoping that we're going to create a more open environment with that committee and see what options we have for making it more usable for everybody on the council.
Appreciate your input. Again, just to make maybe one last comment on that, if I may. There has never been an intention, and it's not the mission of the Operations Committee, to make decisions for the council. Anything that's outside of personnel-related issues would be brought forward as recommendations, and any recommendation that you would have in terms of how to do that in a suitable form is welcome, so that we can have that open discussion and frank discussion. I will say that there are other committees that do meet, and for instance, there's a legislative ad hoc committee. Now, I'm not aware if they have met yet, but I haven't seen minutes from that. I know that there's been a number of counselors that have gotten together and gone on different tours of buildings and things, and I don't know that I've seen minutes on any of those. And I don't know that I necessarily expect to see them. So there are some things that as counselors, we just simply have to go about our business, because anything that would ever directly affect the public has to come forward in the form of a first reading, a second reading, or a resolution. We can't just pass laws or legislation without going through the due process. So I would encourage any of you at any time to pick up the phone, ask questions. There's nothing preventing any of us from having these discussions on a one-on-one basis. And as I stated last week, anything that needs to go forward to the public will go forward to the public. I am open as anybody else about transparency, but keep in mind that works both ways. Councilor Staley.
Well, and I would say that those other references you made, those things were open. Anyone could have come along on those things. They were not told this is just closed to 4 people. When we went on those tours, someone else could have come.
I don't
like the water plant tour.
I'm sorry, I won't interrupt.
So
Okay.
anyway, but the thing is, this is a committee. It's not. This is something that is happening within the body of the city council. So I think looking at opening that up so we could all attend, just like today we're going to have the fiscal committee. Anyone can sit in on that if they want to. Having a committee, the operations committee, where we cannot go, is troublesome to me. That's just my opinion.
I must have missed the meeting invite for the tours. I must have missed any meeting invite for the ad hoc committee regarding the legislative group. That's counselors, and that cannot be attended by more than 4 counselors without it being on public notice. So my point is, there's a lot of work that we need to do together as counselors, and the more we work together and collaboratively and inform one another, the better we can do the business of the city. I don't think there's any member on this group, that is trying to do anything behind closed doors and in secret. Councilor Starr.
I wasn't going to jump in, but I'm kind of offended by that pointing out the groups of tours that we've done, Rick. I think that's a little inappropriate. I think there's a huge difference between a committee that's outlined in a public document and meeting as a group versus 4 counselors getting together to tour a building or to work together. There's a huge difference in the intent of what we're trying to do.
Well, I would differ with that. That might be left up to a different discussion later on, because some of that could have a great impact on the public in the future. And so I would respectfully disagree. And there was not a part of what I said that I intended to be offensive. Yes. Councilor.
Yeah, I don't see
Selber.
any behind-the-scenes intentions on anybody's behalf. We're trying to work through this as new members and as people are here. I think we just probably, as all our committees, and they maybe need to work on our timely communications. We'll work on it as we go for the sake of the citizens of Sioux Falls. This isn't about us. It's for us doing business in an efficient way, and I think all of us have the best of intentions.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
One of the things, and I know we discussed this earlier today, I wanted to talk a little bit about the operations committee and the way it's being used. I'm concerned that the meeting is held in private and other council members aren't allowed to visit as part of that. I know there are some things that include personnel items and things, but I think the role of the committee is expanded, and if we're going to expand the role of the committee, I think it's one of those things that we need to do the business of that group in a public forum, just like we do with other committees that we have. We've brought forward some proposals that I think would be worthy of discussion maybe during this time or in the form of another committee where we're allowed to, the entire council is allowed to be part of that. I know that there are times where we have brought things forward from that group, but at the same time, I think there are times where other councilors want to be part of that, and we'd be in violation of open meeting laws because there would be more than 4 people. And I understand that, but it's a real goal of mine to make sure that we're doing the public's business in public. I think that meeting, at least at minimum, needs to be noticed, just like any other committee meeting or this informational or our normal council meeting. So I think it's something that is worthy of some further discussion.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Erpenbach.
Thanks. Thanks, Councilor Starr. I appreciate that, and I had heard inklings of this. I just wanted to give a little bit of history about the Operations Committee and where it came from and what it does, and just to make sure, I don't want to sound like I'm anti-open meeting, but I want you to understand what this group is about. And so certainly it could be a public noticed meeting. It could meet in this room, and it could be on, we could turn on the cameras. But generally what the Operations Committee does is internal stuff. It's all staff related, it's all strategy related, and it would all qualify for executive session. So we have this open meeting, we notice it here, turn on the TV cameras, have the people come in. 30 seconds later, you go into executive session, you kick everybody out, turn the TV cameras off, and close the doors. Because it is that kind of committee. And I just wanted to read to you some of the notes from that original group. Those of you that were around at that time know that there were some, when this group was organized, when the Operations Committee was created, there were some heavy burdens on leadership in the city council, and the idea was to spread out those burdens so that those issues of personnel issues in particular could be handled by more than just 2 council members. And so I just wanted to read from some of the notes of the original sort of planning committee. It was just kind of an ad hoc group that got together and sort of laid out what do we think we need as a city council? How do we lead our own organization? And there were 4 city council members that were on that group at that time about 5 years ago. The notes from that just in part say most nonprofit organizations use some kind of operations committee concept to help ensure the work of the group continues between board meetings. This proposal to add the operations committee does not take away any of the council's traditional power to act as the policy-making and legislative branch of city government. Rather, the role of the operations committee would be to actively advocate for the council's ongoing needs, to make it as effective as possible while spreading some of the roles of leadership over a broader cross-section of the council. And then I would just remind folks that the Operations Committee, its main role is to oversee staff in terms of the city clerk and the legislative operations manager and the work that those people do. It is not some sort of secret organization that's meeting without anyone else. In fact, if you read through the policies for the City Council, you'll see that Operations Committee can't do anything on its own. All of its recommendations have to go to the full council. You know, if we're going to do any kind of, if it were reprimands or raises or whatever it is for staff members, and those of you that haven't been here, except for a few months, you don't know how we do that yet. But all of those things have to go to the full council. It is only a group that just kind of advises the rest of the council, but it was built as that idea of spreading out some of the weight, some of the burden, and I thank our leadership now, because I, at that time, was either chair or vice chair, I don't recall which. It's a big time commitment. There is a ton of demands on your personal time and your abilities to do the job. To put that committee in place changed the role of leadership, and it made it a stronger leadership, and it has made the council a stronger council because of that. And so certainly we can talk about those other proposals, but I just really want you to understand that this wasn't something that was pulled out of the air, that it really was in response to a deep need to support our leadership in a better way.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Staley.
Well, I had a conversation this morning and just now before this meeting with Greg Jameson, who told me that he was involved with creating the Operations Committee.
He was.
And he said the original intent was to handle minor housekeeping issues behind the scenes. And that he said that he understood the intent that if there was any major issue, that it would be brought out for public discussion.
And it absolutely.
Okay.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chair.
And so, as we are just getting into this, those of us who are new here, we know that you just met, and I've been given different versions of how this information gets dispersed to us. We would like to know exactly what was discussed in those meetings. We want to be a part of the decisions that are being made in those meetings, so that nothing is just handed to us and said, this is how it's going to be. And we think the public has a right to know what's being discussed as well. So moving forward, I think that that needs to be clarified for all of us.
Councilor Erpenbach.
Mr. Chair, I just am reading literally off of our own manual that you were handed in your training as a city council member. I am just reading literally out of that policy of the city council. And it really does talk about analyzing and making recommendations to the full council regarding operating policies and procedures of the council, providing continuity of council advocacy through this body's normal transitions of leadership and membership. No power in this committee, no power to act on behalf of the city council without first consulting with the full council. This group oversees annual review process for staff members reporting to the committee with input from all council members, updates and maintains council staff job descriptions, all executive session material, establishes guidelines in the council procedures manual to help staff members balance the workload created by individual council members, meets at least quarterly. And yes, Councilor Jameson was part of that committee. It was an ad hoc committee that was created in a time of turmoil in our staff and on our council as a whole. And there were 4 council members that were involved with that. We met to review everything about how this body works, everything about what it's like to change leadership, everything about what it means when 3 or 4 or 5 of us are gone in an election year and more people have to come in. There has to be some sort of continuity. You cannot lead a community if you're just randomly ad hoc throwing things out there every now and then. There has to be a policy so that we really do treat everyone fairly and so that leadership doesn't get beat to shreds because they happen to be the ones that we elected. And so that's where it came from. Again, not making it up. It is in your policy manual. We can certainly talk about it, make changes, but I just want you to understand there's history to this.
Okay, very good.
I'd like an opportunity to respond, since she got 2 times, please.
One more.
I'm not saying that there isn't a validity to this group. I'm just saying that they did meet 2 weeks ago. I think we would like a report on what was discussed, and we'd like to have a voice in what was discussed. That's all I'm asking for. We have not had that yet. We've got part of it, but I emailed Councilor Kiley about that yesterday. I'd like to have it all written down as to what was discussed and how we're moving forward with that.
Yes, Councilor Neisser.
I would just say, as somebody who is now on the committee, I think it would be a little troublesome if it was an open meeting. You're just batting around ideas, and so I think that's an issue. I think maybe where the point of maybe confusion or where we could use some help just as new counselors, honestly, is when we do devise a policy, and we're talking about something that might be a little more external, you know, like for public input or things like that, not the internal minutia. When it says consulting with the rest of the council, I guess where we're confused is, what does that mean? Does that mean that it's just an email? Does that mean that we're going to vote on each of these things? How do we, quote unquote, consult and come to consensus, and what should be voted on, what shouldn't? And so I think that's where the struggle is coming for, and it's a fair question, and it's something I'm not even sure about. So,
Thank you very much. And yeah.
Sorry, I'm not accusing anyone of a conspiracy. That was never the point of what I was trying to make. But, Counselor, you sent us an email of the decisions that were made by the committee. I mean, it was a major decision that I don't necessarily, a recommendation of where this policy is going to go. But where's the next step from that? That's just the policy is going to go into effect if we don't talk about it. And it certainly wasn't something that would be discussed in an executive session about who attends directors' meetings on Friday afternoon. And this is a major change, and we haven't had a policy, and I appreciate that we're trying to cement those things. But, you know, there was also discussion of changes to public input, which again needs to be part of a chance for all of us to be part of that. And yes, it is a recommendation, but again, that's not an executive session topic. I think public input is one of the basic rights the citizens of Sioux Falls enjoy and use on a regular basis. And in the short time I've been here, have gotten a lot of good suggestions from people who take time out of their busy lives to come before us. There's some times where it goes a little longer than I want, but that's part of the legislative process.
Okay, thank you. And to end the discussion on this topic, I would just say that, again, what was sent out to you were recommendations coming out of your operations. They were not decisions that were made for the council. And those are, and one of the items that was discussed was what is the proper form for us to have this sort of discussion, because it is difficult for us to get together as a body to have that. And so we're having that today. And I will not make decisions on behalf of the council, and nor will the operations committee make decisions. That's never been our intention. And so hopefully the clarification is helpful. And there will be other items. There were other items discussed, but we haven't finalized those items yet. Therefore, you did not receive a report on those. Some of those will eventually end up in an informational. So anything that we deem that should be public information, anything that is public information will be presented to the public. It's not going to happen behind closed doors. Okay. Any other items for discussion?
Y'all come back now. Cheers.
What kind of morons run this outfit?